Hey everyone, Ripley Sellers with Bob's Watches. I'm here in the studio with Justin for another episode of Vintage of the Week, where we pull aside one remarkable vintage timepiece and share with you exactly why we love it.
Okay, to start off, we got something that I'm excited about.
Oh yeah, I love it.
Sea Dweller. Love the Sea Dweller. You know me, I'm a Sea Dweller fan, right? I generally tend to enjoy the Sea Dweller more than the Submariner, and we got a really nice one today. You want to start us off?
We do, but first I want to know what you're wearing. Quick wrist check. What do you reckon?
So this is another one I love. Grand Seiko. It's got the blue snowflake dial. God, I just love the way this dial looks so much. It's, I wear it every chance I get. It's clean, and again, you know me and Grand Seiko.
Yeah, Grand Seiko does dials better than almost anyone else,
Yeah.
and that one is absolutely lovely.
It's
Plus,
stunning.
It doesn't love spring drive.
Right. Yeah, love it. What do you got on today? This
I'm
looks a little
rocking
different.
something interesting. This one's not mine. It's a AP code 1159. I was originally not a big fan of the watch when it first came out, but having it in person here, it's a really kind of a cool piece. Obviously the case is really interesting, but for me it's the crystal.
Yes.
That double curved sapphire thing, it's hard to get in photos. You really just have to see one.
You got to see it in person.
Yeah.
And just the weird, I mean, it almost plays these tricks on your eye and mind and angles, and right, it's because it's got the carved out underneath as well as the dome on top. And it's just really unique looking.
Yeah, I'm still not sure if I love the watch, but I'm enjoying it and liking it way more than I thought I would.
I did the same thing. I wasn't a huge fan of it, and after seeing it in person, I have a lot more appreciation for it. I actually do kind of like it now. You know, I could see myself wearing it, so it's a good choice.
Yeah, I guess I get the hype. Well, speaking of hype, we got a Sea Dweller here,
Yes.
and it is. I mean, it's a popular watch, but it's almost free from some of the hype that surrounds some of Rolex's other models. I mean, for all intents and purposes, the Sea Dweller is a more capable Submariner.
Correct.
It would almost be the watch the Submariner should have evolved into if the Sub wasn't too iconic for Rolex to change.
Right.
But I feel because it's the other dive watch in Rolex's catalog, a lot of people just kind of forget about it. And perfect example right here, I think this is a stunning value for what you actually get.
This is a beautiful watch, and like you said, I think it gets overlooked a lot. It gets quickly passed over for the Submariners and the Daytonas, and I mean, especially the Submariner being so similar of a watch, and that's Rolex's major watch, right? I mean, everyone knows Submariner Rolex. That's the headliner. So you're right. I think it gets overshadowed, and I think it's kind of a shame because it's a gorgeous watch.
Oh, absolutely. And so what we have right here is a reference 1665.
Yes.
So the first one, so the Sea Dweller itself came about in 1967. It basically, they weren't planning to make it, but when people started diving deeper and staying longer, the issues with saturation diving mandated that there be some way to purge the helium from it. And so that's how it was born. But it was born from necessity. It's such a highly specialized tool watch. I mean, saturation divers, I know one of them.
Right, yeah, very specialized.
I only know one in my life.
Yeah.
So, it's kind of like the Explorer 2. It's sort of quirky insofar as it's so specialized. But this is the first execution, so this is the original vision for it. And right off the bat, you can tell it's got a lot of similarities with like a Sub from the same era. This is before we get into Cyclopses on the Sea Dweller. So you've got that nice big dome crystal here that you see. And then you got the date display at 3 o'clock, but there's no Cyclops over it. And then of course on the 9 o'clock you get the helium escape valve.
Yes.
Overall, I think when we start talking about vintage Rolexes, vintage Rolex sport watches are all incredibly popular.
Right.
This might be one of the best values for the money among vintage Rolex sport watches.
Yes.
It's the first Sea Dweller. It's the only one they ever did with a acrylic crystal. So the subsequent reference, sapphire crystal, still out of that dial at that point. But for a vintage Rolex, having a friction fit bezel, acrylic crystal, yeah, that really leans into the vintage aesthetic, and it is the only acrylic crystal Sea Dweller.
Yes.
And then is getting into as far as why this particular one's interesting. This isn't your average Sea Dweller. It's got a rail dial.
It does. That's it's big with collectors, right? This is technically a Mark II dial, they would call it, which is the rail dial. When you explain what the rail dial is,
yeah. So I guess
are
we should probably move the hand just so you can see this a little bit better. chronology of Sea Dweller dials is, so when it was first made, it's hardly even a real option because it was never formally released to the public. You got the single reds. Those are all prototypes. Some of them, there's like a dozen of them total, or 11 of them. So really, when it first made its debut to the public, we get the double red Sea Dweller, where you get the 2 lines of red text. And they did that for almost the first decade up until about 77. In 77, they switched to, and these are all matte dials since the Sea Dweller debuted after the gilt dial era. So they switched to the Great White with all white text, so it's the Mark II. And on this one, the Mark II being the rail dial, what you notice is right here on the lower half of the dial, you get Sea Dweller, the depth rating, and then the superlative chronometer officially certified text. The spacing of the words is such that superlative and officially are off to one side, and chronometer and certified are off to the other, where you get this gap right between the middle of them, known as a rail dial. You'll also find it on the Explorer 2, which is interesting, but they only did it for a couple years, so about 77 to 79 is when they were doing that. This example's from 79, and then after that we're into kind of Mark III dials, so no more rail dial.
This one's beautiful. It's got a great patina. I love the look of these, these vintage dive watches. That they don't have the surrounds. It's the matte dial. It was before all that. The acrylic crystal is great. To me, the acrylic crystal just screams vintage. It really gives you that vibe. Again, no Cyclops. Love the no Cyclops. It's just so clean
and love the no Cyclops with a domed crystal, because subsequent generation there's no Cyclops either. They went all the way up until the new 43mm model before they added a Cyclops, but having that domed crystal on a Sea Dweller makes it for me.
It does. It's really nice. It's just a beautiful watch, and like we said before, I think they're overlooked. There's definitely less hyped than the Submariners and the other watches like Daytonas, but more closely related to the Submariners, and I actually think that's a good thing, because as well as me that the prices, they just keep going and going and going, it seems, without any end in sight. So this is a chance to get a killer watch. I mean, actually a more capable watch than the Submariner at a better price, a better deal, just because it's not quite so focused yet, which I think is a fantastic opportunity.
Oh, absolutely. You start thinking vintage Rolex dive watches, some of the biggest names that come out of people's mouth, they're all Submariner references. It's like, oh, maybe a 5513 or a 5512. Of course, the red line, like a red 1680. But when you look, none of those are the first sub.
Right.
And if you look at how much it costs to get the 6204, like the first sub, we're talking 6 figures. The first Sea Dweller, which has an arguably a more interesting history, because born out of necessity and this kind of interesting co-op project between the U.S. Navy and Sea Lab and Comex in the later years to develop the helium escape valve. It's a really interesting watch with a great history, so purpose-built, and I feel like just people are sleeping on it.
That will not happen forever. I mean, I think people will come around and...
Well, prices are already on the way up. You used to be able to kind of get these for a song compared to some, like a gilt 5513. Now they're still relatively cheap compared to some of the other vintage sports watches, but yeah, like you said, we're talking about it now. It's only, it's only a matter of time before it's more of a thing, and these are kind of all in that realm of unobtainium.
And it's different. I like that it's different. Submariners are great, right? I love Submariners, but they're way more common, right? This is less common than Daytonas. We see way more Daytonas than we see these. And I mean, if you ask the average person, that probably doesn't seem like, it really makes sense, because Daytonas just get so much more hype, they bring so much more money. And, this is actually a rare watch. And, someone sees it from across the room and, oh, Submariner. And then you kind of take the second look and you're like, oh, wait, that's not a Submariner. That's really cool. What is it? And, to me, the Sea Dweller's always kind of been like the bigger, tougher older brother of the Submariner, right? Like, same family, but a little more depth rating, a little more purpose built, a little more tooly, just like a little tougher version, which personally I really like. I love that kind of outside the pack mentality, just a little bit, and it's cool. That's why I'm such a huge fan of the Sea Dwellers.
And the date isn't an integral part of it. People always talk about the sub. Oh, the sub in its no date form. That's what you want, because that's what's the purest dive watch. You don't need to know the date underwater. Agree, when you're scuba diving. Right. However, when you're saturation diving, you are literally living underwater, and the purpose of the Sea Dweller and having a date was crucial, and it's always had a date. Even had a date before it formally had a helium escape valve when you start looking at the prototypes. And so, personally, I use a date a lot. I use the date on my watch almost as much as I use the time. And so I like that you have the date on it, and it's true to the Sea Dweller's DNA. It's not something they added on later on.
Right.
So you get a very practical watch,
Yes.
but it's also this super cool purpose-built thing. You get a cool dial execution on this one.
It is.
And unlike the new one, this is still 40 millimeters. So
Yeah.
it is thicker than a sub of the same era.
Sure.
But it's still 40 mil. Proportions are very, very similar. Other than being a bit thicker, which is what's responsible for its significantly higher depth rating, it's not like a 43 millimeter watch.
Yes, exactly.
I
It's
can
still
wear
very
this.
similar,
I
yeah.
can wear this, and I can't pull off the new Sea Dweller.
Right. I agree about the date. I'm one who's on the other side of the coin. I could take or leave a date. If I had my choice, I'd probably leave it. But on one like this, I love it. I'm glad it's there. I think just the way it's executed, one, not having the Cyclops, two, just the shape of the date window, and then it has the silver back instead of the black, and it kind of balances a little bit with that 9 o'clock. It's the same shape. I just think it's very well executed. It's very well thought out, and it just adds so much charm to the piece.
And I guess one other thing to point out, like many Sea Dwellers here, it's one of the few Rolexes that has anything whatsoever on its case back. So you flip it over, you see the words Rolex, Oyster, and then original gas escape valve. I don't know, kind of hard to see it there. But yeah, rarely do you ever have any text on
Sure.
Rolex watches. This is just another little kind of trinket. And it also alludes to what this little hole on the side of the case is. It's party piece and the reason why a Sea Dweller is a Sea Dweller.
Exactly, it's what makes it a Sea Dweller, right? That helium escape valve. And I appreciate that it's subtle on this one. It's not big. I mean, Rolex does a great job of that anyway. But like we talked about, it looks like a Submariner, and then you can kind of see, oh, you know what? There are some things that are different. They're not glaringly obvious, to the untrained eye in the very beginning. But you start looking around, and you do see these little treats that kind of differentiate it from the sub.
And this one's in great condition too. Obviously, anyone buying a Sea Dweller, so this one's from '79. Anyone buying a Sea Dweller in the late '70s, this wasn't a status symbol like they are today.
Right.
The person dove with it, probably definitely wore it in the water, certainly. And this one's in really lovely condition, nice patina on the dial. Case, you can tell it's been polished before, but sympathetically, it hasn't been over polished. It kind of has just the right amount of wear. You can tell it's had a previous life, but if you're not into the beat up watch look, this isn't beat up. This is pretty clean.
It's pretty clean. It's not a safe queen, but it's it's definitely not beat up. It's definitely not thrashed. It's it has history. I like to think of that as history with the watch, which is exactly what I want out of a vintage watch.
And this example is available, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that's kind of appropriate to talk about with this watch, because this watch is actually for sale, right? So this watch will be for sale on Bob's Watch's site. So if you're looking for a Sea Dweller, you love this example, you've been looking for an excuse to add one to your collection, you can actually go buy this exact watch, which I think is a fantastic watch. I'd be very happy to own it.
Yeah, definitely. And if you like this particular one, you jump on it, because like any vintage watch, each one's different. You can't really step in the same river twice after 20, 30, 40, 50 years of wear and tear.
Right.
So while your current production Rolexes, they're all largely the same unless someone's damaged it significantly in the recent history. These are all different. You can pull 3 1665s all next to each other. They're all going to be a bit different, and certainly they're not all going to have rail dials.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that's just a great little Easter egg. You see another guy with a vintage Sea Dweller, it's like, but I got this one.
You got the one. Yeah, definitely different. Cool. Well, great. Well, thanks for sharing with us. This is a great watch. I'm glad we got a chance to bring it to all you out there and share with you. It's a beautiful watch.
Yeah, beautiful watch. Someone's going to get lucky and scoop this one up. If I had the money, I would.
Yeah, absolutely.
I already have a sub, and a vintage Sea Dweller seems like a great company, man.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess if you like the watch, head over to the site and pick it up. It's available for purchase until someone buys it. But that's all the time for today. Don't forget to tune in next week for another episode of Vintage of the Week, and I'll see you then.